You're listening to Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Leia. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/The Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Mr. Mike Smith tonight. I've been wanting to talk to Mike for quite a while. We had a quick conversation at, I believe it's Small Town Monsters Monster Fest 2. Mike is an individual who has experienced multiple things in the LBL, or Land Between the Lakes area of Kentucky. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show tonight, Mike. How's it going, sir?
Hey, it's going great. I've been looking forward to this since we spoke, and I'm glad to be here.
Oh, absolutely. Mike, I'm going to go ahead, and I think we've got a lot of ground to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and give the reins over to you. You're welcome to bring us back to the very beginning when all this stuff started happening for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been on a few shows, was privileged enough to be in there with the Small Town Monsters group because of this experience, but I don't consider myself actually a researcher. I'm a hiker and a camper and a fisherman more than anything. But being down here in the Land Between the Lakes, basically my whole life, I feel like it was just bound to happen. I've always been interested in cryptids and in paranormal and things of that nature, but had always also been the guy where I would need to see it to believe it. And back in 2020, it's May 10th, I'll never forget it. So again, big fisherman, part of my life, part of my family's life. And we were out on the lake the day before on May 9th, and it was springtime, so the weather was volatile, and we just had a great Saturday. And my infant daughter, I think it might have been her first trip out. I know it was my wife's first trip out since COVID. And so that Saturday, man, it was such a neat time. And we got out on the main lake, and when the water's low on Kentucky Lake, there's sandbars, and it's almost like being at a beach. And the water's not warm enough yet to swim, but you can splash around. And I had my 3 daughters with me. Such a great day. So of course the Sunday came, we wanted to go again, and man, the wind was the main thing. And Kentucky Lake can get rough. It's you can see it on a map. So it's a pretty big lake. And a map, when you look at the entire United States, you can actually see those 2 lakes there. So it's sizable, and it got rough. And we went to this one little spot where I knew the wind, the direction it was coming from, would not be a factor, but I wasn't sure how good the fishing would be. And we drove down a 2-mile road. The boat ramp was closed, actually, but there was a spot where they had put kayaks in, and I put my boat in there. I tell you, I left my boat parked in my trailer in the water because I didn't want somebody else to come down and force me to go around the federal barriers to actually get my boat out. And I ended up getting a ticket by the Forest Service, but the events of the day that happened, I didn't really mind that. But anyway, we went out and tried to fish, and it wasn't good. The waves kept us in this little cove. So what we also like to do is always have a fire and cook some hot dogs. And so we pulled up on a little rocky bank, and it was not anywhere close to a beach. There was basically enough room for me to get out. My oldest daughter, the years fly by. She was 15 or so at the time. And the little girls, my wife, and I think my middle daughter was 5 or 6 there. And then, like I say, my youngest one was just an infant, 6, 7, 8 months old. We did have her in life jackets and all the appropriate stuff, but they stayed in the boat. It was such a small little spot. And I built a fire, and we were cooking hot dogs. And at one point, I heard walking. And there's something called the North-South Trail that runs through there. And I've done all of it. It's divided into a north half and a south half. And I've done all of the north half multiple times. So it was in range, but somebody would have had to been way off track to been walking up where I heard them. So I just asked the girls to keep their eyes out and their ears open, because I thought some people were coming up on us. And that's basically all that came of it until we were getting ready to leave, I'd say 30 minutes later. And my oldest daughter asked me, what do you think happened to those people? And I said, I don't know. They probably saw that we were down here or smelt the smoke or something and decided just to turn around. But I was getting ready to push the boat off. I had it tied to a little tree. And we all heard a knock, a clear wood knock. And we'd all watched Finding Bigfoot, and some of these shows had been popularized by then. And, everybody just kind of looked up, and my oldest daughter said, Dad, what was that? And I thought it had to be people messing with us. So I said to her jokingly, well, they say Bigfoot does that. And when I looked down, there was a stick I knew would be a good hard stick and would make a good knock. So it was just, I took a knock on this little tree, and about 100 yards down the bank, we heard another knock. And, they're kind of startled. And we had decided we were either going to go home or we were going to find another place to fish across this cove. But because we were hearing these knocks, we decided to go down the bank a little and look up in there where we heard the second knock and see what happened or what was going on. And man, I looked up it's something you'll never forget. I looked up there, and there was a spot of sun that came all the way through the canopy. It wasn't real thick, but there were leaves. But this sunspot was up there, and standing there was a Bigfoot. And I said, there's Bigfoot, and I'm pointing. And the girls, where? And I had to watch the boat because we were getting close to some stumps and some logs and some sticks. And I didn't want to mess my prop up, so I was turning my wife where she could see it, and it actually ran away from where I turned the boat in the opposite direction. And I ended up, when I say turn, I'm basically spinning my boat in a circle in this small little cove. And so I spun around again, and then it kind of came back towards us where the original knock was, and the ridge we were on was, and they never could track it. It was so fast. I saw it going down into a gully and pull itself up. I saw its hand. And then it went on up into the trees, and the trees were shaking, and the wind was blowing, but these trees were protected. And my oldest daughter did see the trees shaking, because I was saying, there's where it's going, where those trees are shaking. And we just I put the boat in neutral, and we drifted a little bit. We're drifting down the bank, and we're just kind of collecting our thoughts. And I actually wanted to go across the lake and just fish a little more. I was stunned, but I wasn't really scared. But as soon as I hit the engine, and so I was away from the bank. My ears ring all the time. It's called tinnitus. So I don't hear a lot with background noise. And I was turned looking away, which put my ear right to the engine. My girls were right on the bank, and they both heard what they described as guttural, frustrated screams. And they looked at each other at the same time and said to each other, "Did you hear that? What was that?" And my wife's hit me on the arm, and she's saying, "Get out of here," because something was still in the woods, had followed us down the bank, and probably was not less than 100 yards around the back of this cove where my boat was sitting. where she thought that this thing might be coming around to meet us at the truck. So she was very, very adamant that we leave and get out of there. And as we were putting the boat on the trailer, a vehicle was coming down the road, and it was just a family. And so besides them and the obvious Forest Service people that we knew were there because of the ticket on my windshield, nobody else. You can hear them coming down this gravel road. So yeah, so we packed up, and man, I called a guy named Charlie Raymond with the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization that night at 11 o'clock. And he called me right back and took my report, gave me some great tips. He told me to draw a picture. I drew a picture and just make notes. And it was a while before he could get back and do the actual investigation, but he came back in the fall and was gracious enough not only to take my report and want to be at the scene, but also take me up in the woods and kind of show me some stuff. Spent several hours up there. My oldest daughter went with us, and we pretty much are dead set now that there was two of them, and I think they smelled the hot dogs or the fire. And I really think one was knocking to the other one saying, hold up a minute. I don't know what one knock means, but I know I got between their communication. And if they had their heart set on eating or had that on their minds, us seeing them, I think really upset him. So I think the second one was actually shaking the trees, maybe as a signal for that one to come on. But we found tracks that day. We found all kinds of sign. It really opened up my eyes to what could be there. And it's still to this day, I don't know. I've had several encounters since then. I approached it as if I'm going to be in the woods with these things, I need to know what I can and can't do, where I can and can't go. I had heard all the creepy stories and experienced a few things in between the lakes. Since I guess I moved down to this area in 1988 to go to school in Marshall County, Kentucky, which is right there on the lake. But I had family down here, so every summer of my life, I was down in this area. So I had heard the stuff and suspected things, but there's no going back once something like this happens to you. And I'd always thought, I see a lot of these shows, and I know there's a lot of scary experiences, and a lot of people have these experiences, but most of them are alive to tell the tale. And after seeing that thing move, I know if it had wanted to get us, it would have gotten us. So I got some guidelines. I didn't go out by myself for a long time. Now I do in the daytime. I do not at night. I rarely go out at night, barely, never by myself. I've been out with Charlie on an expedition in a few groups, and a couple people I've taken that have podcasts and YouTube shows. But man, it's been a neat thing for me. I think I have turned it into a positive. I'm fascinated by the outdoors. Like I said, that's always been a part of my life. I completely understand the people that go the opposite way and have the PTSD and the negative things. But I guess, after that, going to find the prints and just stepping into it. And again, Charlie was a great help. This whole Bigfoot community, there's so many people that I've found that are just really mentors and really kind of happy that other people are seeing this stuff. And it validates, and that's why I came across your show, of course, on YouTube. I sit at my desk. I hope my boss isn't listening and listen to a lot of this stuff. I don't watch it all, of course, because I'm working, but it was just neat. It's really been a positive for me since then.
You've had other things happen, and we'll talk about that probably later, but over the years, have you had an idea of what Bigfoot is as you start to get more knowledgeable and start to go out looking for it?
Yeah, man, I tell you. So I'm a Christian, and I don't like to talk about it and brag about it. I know everybody's got levels of involvement. I don't just show up at church every once in a while. I'm very active. I've been able to play piano by ear about anything I want and sing a little bit since I was 4. And so I share that at church. I play and sing a little bit. So it's a huge part of my life is what I'm saying. And the outdoors is very much part of that and connected me that way. And I try to look at Bigfoot and anything really through that lens. And a lot of people tend to think that that's contradictory, but I think that the Bible is a supernatural, multi-dimensional handbook, basically saying, hey, there's a whole nother world that you can't see, and they cross over sometimes, and there's just a big picture here that you're a small part of. So I did think it was just a flesh and blood thing. I think it may still be with some abilities that we don't know about, but I'll tell you, the very next experience I really had was finding a really large footprint that through the course of some podcasts and some mutual friends, and it showed up in the Small Town Monsters documentary, we've determined was not actually a Sasquatch. We even had Dr. Jeff Meldrum kind of look at the video and the pictures of it. So, that's a whole nother rabbit hole there with Land Between the Lakes. But in doing that, the day I found it, me and my son were there, we found it, I covered it up. I went back 2 days later with another friend of mine, a lifelong friend from high school, and he was really interested in this. And while we were letting the plaster dry, I said, well, let's just go check this ridge out. So this was all new to me, and I really like to know the areas. I'm sitting here looking at topographical maps of the entire Land Between the Lakes that I, of course, printed out and go by. But so I was interested in the topography, of course, and there's a lot of old roads. There's been settlements there. If you know the story, there was towns there. So there's cool stuff. I know where there's a Model T, for example, that's still pretty intact, sitting up there. We found that this day. But on the way back, he found what he thought was a footprint on this little knoll. And we'd had some interactions. We thought, you can talk yourself into everything's Bigfoot. You hear these things, and we're having fun with it. But he bent down, and we heard a jump down this ridge. You could feel it hit, and you could feel the footsteps. No mistaking that bipedal, heavy footsteps. We kind of take about 10 more steps because we knew we were going to be able to see this thing running through this wide open forest. And it's wintertime now, so you can see several hundred yards in a lot of these places, and there's nothing there. It's just gone. And that has happened to my wife and I before. I do have a picture that I took of one I saw running on the ridge. And I snapped 3 shots, and I've got what I know to be it ducking behind a tree and kind of peeking. And I actually went up there the next weekend. I took my wife to get a comparison shot of me in the photo to show that there was room for a man-sized thing and there wasn't a stump or anything. But I was not aiming. I saw this thing running and just held my phone up, and where I found the pictures were way off in the frame, almost out of the frame, because it covered so much ground in a mere second. So I don't know if they're disappearing or if they're actually that fast or if they can cloak or what, but they do tend to disappear. And so these people that say they're multidimensional, I have to believe as a Christian in another dimension, and that's well documented in the Bible, Old and New Testament, about angels and people coming in and out of another realm into this realm. So I don't have a problem believing in any of that, if that answers the question.
No, it definitely does, and I'm a Christian as well too. Listeners of the show will know that because I've said it in different shows before. Yeah. I really like the way that you put that, where we believe that there's another it's so weird to think about. I've never thought of it that way, but we literally do, that there is another dimension that sometimes we see. That's wild. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Man, that's gonna mess with my head tonight for quite a while.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
No, I love it. That's so cool, man. Like, you think of the stories of the angels and the demons in the Bible, and it's like, yeah, that stuff's still going on today, man. But
absolutely.
That's wild stuff. So that was, what was the time frame on that again, where you would feel something jump down the ridge?
Yeah, well, when it happened after so that would have been late. That would have been either late 2020 or early 2021. It was the winter. And again, then it happened. I mean, I've had experiences this past February, my wife actually had her first sighting. Now, it was from some time away, but you get into these areas. And I tell you what, I purposely go to other areas to validate that I'm not finding things and I'm not thinking everything is a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or some type of sign. And I mean, I've hiked miles. I go at least 5 miles on a short day trip, and sometimes get into double digits if I'm out all day. And I'm off track. I usually start near a trail or a road, but you really got to get off track to see a lot of this stuff. Sometimes the elevations here above sea level, the lake sits at 360 feet, and some of the hills are up around 600 feet at the peak. So sometimes I'm climbing, 200 or 300 feet, which won't impress a lot of the real mountain folk, but I'm 52. It makes me huff and puff a little, but yeah, so I've had, that's when that one was. And then I've had basically, I don't get out much in the summertime. If there's listeners here around this area, I don't know if other areas are as bad as Land Between the Lakes or not, but there are things that will bite you. You can't see them. You don't know what they are, where they came from. If you get out in the summertime, basically June, July, August, September, I don't really go. And if I do, I don't get off the trail or in the bush. But then the winter comes, October, definitely through March till the fish start biting. So October, November, December, January, February, March, I'm out there every weekend, sometimes multiple times a week. And again, I can almost guarantee in this one area I go, and I don't take a lot of people there because I really think there's a group that lives there, and I don't want a bunch of people running through there, hollering and knocking on trees and just acting a fool. They might laugh at us, I think, a lot. But yeah, I've got an area, man, where I find the prints, and the tree structures fascinate me. I'm telling you, there's something to that. I don't know if it's just their artwork, if there's different areas where you'll find large ones, and then on these ridge tops you'll find, it's almost like children or juveniles, just like a kindergartner would doodle on the walls, and it's always, I mean, you find these intricate weaved things that I doubt there's a lot of Blair Witch fans up there in the 2 miles off the track, 300 feet up, just waiting for me to maybe see this one day. So
I know that it's not your story, but you did mention that your wife was able to have her first sighting.
Yeah.
Is that anything that you would be able to share what happened in that situation?
Sure. And it's a culmination of several experiences. In fact, I tell her we're gonna hear one scream at us if she's in the boat or she's around, because that had happened multiple times. And so I can give you some background on that leading up to her actual sighting. We were in a boat. This was last spring, in the back of a bay. I fish. You might can tell if I keep talking, I like to have the place to myself. I don't like a lot of people around, and so I fish also where there's not a lot of people fishing. I hike where there's not a lot of people hiking, and so we're back in this bay, and it was close. I guess it was almost June, late May, early June. So the boating traffic was picking up. The water was getting warm enough to swim and ski. and there'd been a lot of boat traffic that day. And my daughter, my middle daughter, was just figuring out how sound traveled on the water. And she'd hear a boat that she'd think was coming from one direction, and it'd actually be coming from another. And I'm an athletic director and soccer coach now, but I've got over 10 years in the classroom. So I'm a teacher by heart, and definitely with my own children. And it got late, and I asked her if she really knew what an echo was or if she'd heard an echo. And she didn't. So I'm telling you, if I had a recorder going, this sound would be on every show that's on TV and every podcast. It was so good, but we were not thinking Bigfoot at all. So I let out this woo really loud, and it's bouncing off the hills. And then right behind us, we hear this whoop, and you can hear the P sound. And it was close. We were in a little creek, and it didn't sound like it was too far down the creek. And when that came, coyotes started going, and the woods got kind of wild. And then all of a sudden, off in the distance on another ridge, you hear this. I'm obviously not doing it loud. I don't want to blow the speaker out here, but it was very loud, and even the crickets stopped. The frogs stopped. The entire area got spooky, and the girls are just looking at like, okay, that was something. Let's go. And we did. We left. We had a few more encounters like that. We've noticed they'll actually whistle at you. They're very curious, and in the daytime they'll whistle. And my middle daughter has actually gotten some responses. And we had a boat beached one day, and some rocks slipped down it was a steep bank above us, and I knew that was odd. And my little daughter, she's 4 now. She will swear she saw Bigfoot's leg. She says it Y-E-G, yeg, of course. But I'm giving you the background. When all these real close things were happening, and I've had probably 6 or 7 good sightings, and my wife is just like, she's so frustrated. She's like, man, I can hear them, and I know that's them, and I want to see one. And she really wanted to see one from the safety of the boat. She felt, she's kind of uneasy still, but she's so curious. And I think that's what these experiences do to people. But we were out hiking. We had hiked up a place that I've got a place where in the last couple of years, I'm seeing a lot. And not, just peekers, mostly peekers around the tree. So that's what we went to do. We were cooking. We did our standard thing. We cooked our hot dogs. And I noticed you get a lot of activity on the way in at first or the way out. Definitely on the way out more. But we were going in, and I've got this feeling, and we stop every once in a while. I stop in certain places, and I usually wear similar clothes and just follow a pattern to maybe let them know that it's me. I don't know that that's, I've never had one walk up and look him in the eye and us kind of get to know each other, nothing like that. But I feel like they may know people and their intentions or different groups. That may just be me reading into it, but we're stopped at a spot, and I looked over and I saw the head come around. Now, it was definitely over 100 yards away. And I said to my wife, okay, look over my right shoulder. And I tell you what, if you get your phone out, I'm convinced they know you're taking pictures or that you're doing something that I don't think they like it. But so I didn't get anything out until after she saw it. And when it moved, she's like, there it is again. And you can tell it's something 5, 6, 7 feet tall. It's up a tree. And then it kind of, I got my phone out, and I've got, again, a couple pictures where you can see there's a dot there, and then the very next picture, there's no dot there, but it's that far away. So I don't show that stuff because, people want the slam dunk photo, and I really don't know that would make a difference to a lot of people, even if you had that. But yeah, she was, for the moment, she was like stunned and happy. But then as we got to walking back, she's like, now you've seen them a lot closer than that. So I think now she's on a mission to actually get get a little closer and see another one. But you could tell her demeanor and things. It was neat. It was neat because you can believe it and you can be around it, but it's still to this day when, I usually see, I guess, one a year. I'd say probably one a year, maybe a little more. And they're just letting me see them. They're just letting me see them in this one area. So, but yeah, we're looking forward to the when football season. I'm actually a soccer coach. I'm in my season right now. It's my 24th year doing that in Kentucky. So football and soccer in Kentucky, we wrap up October and November, and we're ready to get out. We were talking about today when I was telling her about the interview of tonight, and she's like, "Man, I'm ready to get back out in the woods and get a better sighting than that one I had."
That's really cool because it probably helps the both of you connect a little bit better when like you are probably talking to your family about what happens out in the woods, and once she's able to like, okay, I get it now in a different way.
Yeah.
What would be the closest you think that you've ever gotten to a Bigfoot before?
Okay, and so this is neat. So when Charlie came down, we got a rangefinder. And you can see this on Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization's YouTube. You got to scroll down. He called it the Beast of LBL. But I take him out in the boat, and that's my first interview, investigation, anything really with Bigfoot. And we put a guy up there in the spot. He range finds us in the video at 80 yards away. But he edited out when I didn't get as close. The water was actually lower when we were there. So we estimated it was 60 yards when it was standing by the tree and about 38 to 40 yards when it came down through the gully. There's been one other time when and again, fishing, I'm way back. I'm in the daytime, and I'm up against a fallen tree, almost camouflage. And I hear it, and I look up, and it's walking right past me. It's walking right past me, and it walked, and it was probably, again, that was a 30 to 40 yard one. And it walked into a little grove, and I was trying to get my trolling motor to get in position where I could actually film it. And I dropped my trolling motor and made a loud rattle, and it looked up, and then it was gone. And it's sometimes it's weird. You can hear them walking or running away, but sometimes it's completely silent, almost like they're levitating or something. So those two times, 30 yards to 40 yards, and then the rest of the time, you're looking at 100 yards or so. And again, most of the time it's peaking. We had an encounter with my wife where the one where it disappeared on us, we were up on a ridge. I carry my daughter. I'm going to stop now. She's getting old enough to walk. But going up the hills when we're hiking, I would put my youngest one on my shoulders. And my pack, it doesn't exceed 30 pounds, my day pack, but she was 30 or 40. So I'm climbing up these hills with, 60, 70 pounds on me. Well, she knew I was getting ready to put her down when we got to the top. And when I set her down, she started screaming. And I don't know if it startled this thing or what, but something jumped down the hill. You can hear it running off. It went down into a culvert. We couldn't see it. There's actually video of this. Brian King Sharp posted this on his Sasquatch Odyssey YouTube. I took video of us walking out. So and my little daughter passed out as soon as my wife picked her up. She's asleep when my wife's carrying her. But so we stayed up on this ridge, and this road took us all the way out to what's called a main road, a connector road. Still gravel, still all gravel. But evidently this thing stayed with us down in the gully, which is odd. And when we got to Reston, we heard it, and my wife went up the road a little bit, and I just looked up, and it's standing there. And this is the only one that when I looked at it, I really thought, this thing wants us out of here. And it was probably inside 100. I'd say probably 50 to 60 yards, and it's standing there. I actually went and it left two prints by the tree it was at. And I looked up at the road, and my wife can tell she's mouthing at me. She's like, you're looking at one. And she's lip reading, and I'm trying to signal to her. And it always happens. We had not seen anybody all day, and then you can hear this four-wheeler and this ATV coming down the road, and I looked up, and the thing was gone. So, but now I get a lot of people will see stuff online or whatever, videos. A lot of my friends, and they tease me. It's funny. A lot of them tease me about it, and I completely understand. I say, you're free to think I'm as crazy as you want to think I am. But then a lot of them will tell me, years ago, I had a guy tell me about a Pre-Patterson Gimlin sighting right around here. A guy at church, he waved me down. He'd seen something on YouTube, and he said, Mike, are you serious? Have you seen this thing? Yes, sir. And he said, well, I've never told many people this, but my grandfather, years ago, was heading down on our property, and this is real close to my house, actually. Now, we have a couple little rivers and some creek systems that actually run into Barkley Lake. If you stayed in the creek, you could get right to Barkley Lake and LBL. So I don't know if there's a connection. We're probably 20 miles away, but he said he was going down to the barn by this creek. The groundhogs had gotten in the barn, and he was just going to shoot some. This is back in the 50s. And then his old dog that was supposedly really loyal, really good dog, stopped at the edge of this creek and was barking and growling and would not come. And he thought that was odd because this dog's real obedient. And so he walked over. He said it smelled like rotten fish. And so he just thought that somebody had thrown some fish down in the creek or something. And he said he looked up, and the bushes parted, and this hairy, ape-like, 8-foot-tall monster looked at him, kind of puffed at him, and walked off. And he told everybody, and the reason this guy was telling me this, his grandfather's long past, but he said, I think I'm the only one that believed him. It changed his grandfather, how he even operated on his own farm. And he remembered when I guess it was the early 70s on In Search Of, when Leonard Nimoy and the Patterson Gimlin film happened to be on when the whole family was there at his grandfather's house, and he remembers his grandfather going, I told y'all, there it is. That's exactly what I saw. That's it. And he said he would never forget the feeling of how his grandfather felt vindicated. And his family I don't think they still believed him.
That's an incredible side account. I love those ones where it's like a Pre-Patterson Gimlin, because it's so rare to hear them, because usually those individuals are getting up there in years. So you being able to share it secondhand is pretty special for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Being out in the woods quite a bit, and you hear about LBL has some really weird stuff associated with it at times. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that anything has ever followed you home? You get home and there's weird stuff that occurs, or is that something that thankfully you don't have to worry about?
Well, I tell you what, man, and not until this last year, and this is one of the things I think I'm struggling with right now. And I haven't taken many pictures. Yes, to answer your question, yes. I was out with Charlie one night on an expedition, and this was October 2021 or 2022. I can't remember. And we saw some orbs, and they looked like headlights of hikers. But I know that area real well, especially the area I'm in, and the Kentucky Lakeside north of 68. I don't know it like the back of my hand, but I know it pretty well. And I'm really comfortable even navigating at night without a flashlight in a lot of areas. So he sees these lights come in, and I said, man, they would have to be about 50 feet off the ground for us to be seeing them. That's a big open field close to the lake, Charlie. And they disappeared. And that was my first time hearing about this association with this. And then what was weird is later on, and this was the night that, and I think you've had Larry Sidwell on your show. This was the night Larry had his first sighting. Dr. John was there. He was actually in my truck. I drove him to this site we were all at. And there was a sighting of one, and a friend of mine named Ray and I were away from where the sighting was, maybe a quarter of a mile. And we heard the conversation, the samurai talk they talk about down in an area. So we assumed there was at least two. So it was weird that we saw 3 orbs, and then there was maybe 3 different subjects in that area that were experienced by us. So I got into that. I haven't been back when I was into this initially, and again, this is 21, 22. I was going to my area twice a week, 3 times a week, as much as I could. And again, what I think they knew I was there, and I was leaving. I've got a log where I leave 15 rocks on, and I leave them in a different pattern, and then I would get back, and they'd be in a different pattern. I'd leave them candy bars or granola bars sometimes. They don't like Rice Krispie treats for whatever reason. The ones here don't like those. But so I was doing a lot of that, and then I stopped. I got really, really busy, and I noticed on my little property, I've got 5 acres. I've got a really nice little spot. I've got a little 3-acre spot where there's a spring coming out of a rock. It runs year round. It runs maybe 100 yards, a little more, and it runs down into a hole in the ground. They call this area Sinking Fork. And that spring goes into what's called Little River, which is a tributary of Barkley Lake. And I'm surrounded by probably 200 acres of farmland. There's a few houses around, but there's enough creek and dense wooded area where something could stay in it, and none of us around here would see them if they didn't want to be seen. But I'm down there. I find a lot of arrowheads and a lot of Indian Native American artifacts, and I noticed what they call glyphs or some kind of tree structures, and I was baffled by it. And I even went as far as to seek out some people that believe in fairies and know about fairies and things, and send them some pictures, and they said, no, this is not that. And everybody kept saying, this looks like Bigfoot. So I've been quietly, I didn't want to worry my wife. I let it happen a while. I would start moving them in different ways. I left some bread down there. The guy named Daryl Denton told me they like bread, and I left a bag of bread tied way up in a tree, and something untied the bag, got the bread out, and tied the bag back in a different way. And just this past week, at the end of my house, that's where the entrance is to my dog pen. I've got it's 100 long, it's 100 feet of fence in a square. So it's 10,000 square foot yard we keep them in. And I was going out there, and right in front of the gate, something's been leaving X's and again, different. What really got with this one is it was under, a portion of it was under our metal roof porch there. So I don't know if that's mine from Land Between the Lakes that missed me and they're just wanting to come interact, or what this is. But it's strange, and I'm finding out it's fairly common in this realm. So I'm not spooked by it, but I'm intrigued.
And you said this is just in the last week or so?
Yeah,
Wow.
the new one I found,
yeah.
and it's been going on about a year. It was about a year ago, but it was weird. Well, what was weird about it is I broke my summer rule, and my wife's sister was in from New York, and so the days are running through. This would have been early August. And she wanted to go. She'd heard about all this stuff, so she wanted to go in there. And we hiked and had a great day. And I did get covered in ticks and no-see-ums, even though I had jeans on and all kinds of spray and everything. But it was just weird that I had made a pretty recent trip in there, and now these things are back up close to the house. So I don't know. I'd love to hear some input on that. Maybe I consider myself a rookie, man. This is just 4 years for me. I'm intrigued, and I'm happy to help people that come in this area, because I do know there is some dangerous stuff. The craziest thing when I started running around LBL that most people said was, watch out for the old cisterns and wells and septic tanks and unmarked pitfalls that are out there. And that is obviously true. So when somebody calls me and says, hey, will you take me out, or I'm going to go out by myself anyway, I'm glad to do it just for safety reasons. But I don't know that I ever want to be like a researcher or anything like that. It was neat to be with Small Town Monsters. Joe Doyle with Hellbent Holler, he and I are getting to be really good friends. And he tells me all the time, you got to get out and do some of this stuff. I don't really, it would cut into my fishing time. It's basically the short version, and I still want to fish more than I want to get out there. But I don't know, man. It's neat. It keeps getting forced on me for some reason.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing where, especially if it's starting to show up at your house on your own property, just be very, very aware of these things. Talking to people for a few years, you start to see patterns that arise of things that might happen when it starts showing up at your house.
Yeah.
I just remember the power you have as a believer,
Oh, yes.
You're
yes,
aware of
yes.
that.
Absolutely. I don't actually, Martin Grove. I've gotten to know him real well.
Yes,
and
sir.
He's an expert in that area, and let me know right away a lot of those things.
Yeah, I don't know. I myself am still learning a lot, and I'm convinced that, man, there's some of these interviews, I feel like some of these guys are not bringing back Bigfoot to their home, but they're bringing back something else, to be honest.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
That's pretty
Yep.
scary stuff,
Yes. You're correct. Yep. And that's why I haven't given it too much energy and haven't really put that much into it. And, I was fortunate enough, as I had a paranormal experience at Waverly Hills and with my ex-wife, where I turned into from a skeptic to a believer real quick, and had gotten into the paranormal kind of thing. And so I think that prepared me. Had I not had that experience in my life, I don't know that this Bigfoot stuff had have gone real well. But I learned with that, and I think it's true here, a lot of times you open a door, and I use the Alaska reference a lot, even though I've never been and I've always wanted to. You can leave your cabin door open in Alaska, and a lot of really neat, nice things will probably come visit you. But a grizzly bear could also come visit you through that same door. And so I, as a Christian and a believer in those, I don't open any doors intentionally. I'll tell you that.
That's a really good way to put it, actually. One thing I wanted to ask you is, because we are focused on this one area, have you ever had any interactions with anything else besides Bigfoot in this area?
Yes. And that's, it was neat to see the faces of, I'm weird. I tell people it sounds funny, but if you spend some time with me, I'm in tune with things a lot of times. And I've learned to really trust my gut. And it's not a supernatural thing, I don't think. I think it's just, I don't know. But I remember telling them, I did not know any of the locations for, like, the massacre in 82. One of my contributions to the Small Town Monsters thing is I validated that rumor was going around and that story was there pre-internet, because a lot of people think that's just an internet invention. And I told them in high school, I was camping. Well, no, we didn't even get there. And this story, I don't know if it made the cut in the movie or not. I can't remember, but I was one of the four. I worked at a place called Bonanza. It was a restaurant, and I was one of about four guys there that were really, really active, and we used to skip school and go to land between the lakes. And we would all hunt, squirrel hunt a lot. I didn't do a lot of deer hunting, but I guess to people listening outside Kentucky, there's a stereotype that everybody here is an outdoorsman or a hunter, and to some degree that's true. But me and these other guys, we were really, that's what we did. And so we used to go to the assistant manager's house about every Friday and Saturday night and just have a party. And she was not contributing to the delinquency of minors. Not everybody there was a minor, but she just felt like it was a safe place, and she didn't want us all running around. And it was really cool. But it was a strain on her. And so they decided one night we were going to go camping. And they went out during the day and set this stuff up at this location. I don't remember, because when I got there it was night, but it was around DeMumbers Bay. And my contribution, I had a van and I had a big farm. We had 80 acres there, and I had a lot of firewood. So even though you're in LBL and we could have gathered wood, nice, good split firewood. So I was going to bring some firewood and stuff, and I got to work because we were all going to do this after work. And they were like, Mike, you've got to go get all our stuff. We're not camping tonight. And I didn't really understand why. And they didn't tell me why. They were just like, just please go right now. I mean, the manager let me off work. I did this when I should have been working. Just please go right now before it gets too dark and too late. So I know you will get back. Take a guy named Craig with you. He knew where it was. I did a lot of times at that time. I always had a pistol. Most of us had a hunting rifle or a pistol or something in our vehicles. And they specifically asked, do you have your pistol? I'm like, well, yeah, of course. You're not allowed to carry over there, but I had it in the glove box. But anyway, I'm still laughing about this. And we get down this road, and there's all the stuff. And Craig had told me on the way that they had heard something. And he was calling it a wampus cat. And I still don't know what a wampus cat is. But we get out there. There's just a few chairs. I don't even think they had any tents set up. There might have been a few in packs. Wasn't much stuff. An old folding card table. We're packing this stuff up. And from across the bay, you hear this. I thought it was a mountain lion. I had grown up a little bit. I spent 4 years in D.C. and up in the Shenandoah River in West Virginia. My dad always took us canoeing and stuff, and sometimes we'd stay out as much as a week. So I had heard mountain lion scream. So I thought this was a mountain lion, but it was coming at us. And Craig was like, "Oh, Smitty, we got to let's go, let's get in the car. That's it, it's coming for us." And, I thought maybe we were by a kill that we couldn't see, and it was just coming around and trying to defend a deer down. So I still didn't think much of it. And we got out of there. And it was a few months later that I remember, I believe it was the same assistant manager asking me, "Did you hear about what happened to those people over there?" And that's the first time I'd heard about the family being massacred, and it was in that same area. So I'd been to DeMumbers Bay in the daytime, maybe once or twice more since then, trying to fish, and I just feel weird. And so I told the Small Town Monsters crew, and I'd already confessed to them that I was more of a Bigfoot guy. I had experienced that experience. I had a weird experience with ghosts and orbs and just being around there, but I was not into the Dogman thing. But we were looking at some stuff on a map, and I said, "Oh yeah, I don't go to DeMumbers Bay." And Heather Moser said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "I get a weird feeling over there." And she said, "Well, that's where we get all of our Dogman sightings and encounters, and a lot of them are right in that area." And I said, "Yeah, I don't like it. So it makes me feel bad." So I had that experience. That night we were with Charlie. When I was with Charlie, when we saw the orbs, we were in the cemetery, and we're sitting there, and I can see. It's weird. People that have this ability will know. Sometimes Like if I say to you right now, the Statue of Liberty, a picture of the Statue of Liberty, it pops in your head. We can all see it. I've never been there. I can see it. So sometimes when people are connected with things, you get things like that are in your mind. And then sometimes you actually physically see stuff. Well, I looked back and physically saw a shadow person in this cemetery. And I told Charlie, I said, all right, Charlie, you're going to think I'm funny, but there's something back there. And he's like, oh, he's Bigfoot. Bigfoot. I said, no, it's not Bigfoot, man. So we walked through this cemetery, and right there's a tombstone. The guy's last name is Bannister. The tombstone has a crack through it, and it says murdered. And he was shot through his window in the 30s and died. We did his death reports online. We did, I believe it's Richard Bannister. And Charlie's just kind of looking at me. He's like, you saw him? I said, well, I don't know if it was him, but I just saw his shadow walking back here. I went back with my son. I think it was the next week. My son works midnights, and he doesn't get a lot of time off, and he had to ask off. So it may have been 2 weeks later. And I took him there, and we took our little K2 meters that you see on the ghost shows, and something was talking to us. And again, I don't ever attach any emotion to this. I will say, is there something here that would like to speak to us? A lot of people, when you have somebody pass away, and I do believe your loved ones can come back and interact with you. I do believe that. But a lot of times something will happen in your house, and you'll pour all that emotion, and you'll be like, Mom, is that you? Well, it's not your mom, but now you've allowed it to connect to you. And so I knew all those rules, so we didn't do that. But as we were sitting there, we heard something walking. This cemetery is just basically a square. It's got a chain link fence around it, but it's back in the woods. And we heard something walking. And I said, that's probably a Bigfoot walking by. And then we went to the other corner, and we heard it walking around the back. And I'm like, okay, it's passing by. Let's get on out of here. So we came up to the gate at the front of the cemetery where it should have been going away. And we hear it walking towards us. And so I looked at him, and we had a little fire going by the truck, and the truck was, 50 feet away. So I said, let's just go over by the truck. And we're on the tailgate of the truck, and we hear something now back on that other side. And it was a growl. It was a low guttural, just. And he looked at me, and I said, get in the truck, son. And we got out of there. And we didn't go back. And then I had broken my rule a little about being out at night. And so, yeah. And then, we had a bear sighting recently. A bear came through, and the Forest Service actually posted a video of it at Golden Pond in LBL. And Martin, people that have been in Land Between the Lakes know we've had bears there for a long time. Whether they're in and out or there's a resident population, you'll see tracks. It's always been known that you could run into a bear. But this past Christmas, and I just remember it because there's a place called Patty's. It's in Grand Rivers. It's a restaurant. I would recommend it to anybody that comes down here. You got to make reservations. It's always packed. It's 1880 settlement, so they're back in the old days, but they have a huge Christmas light display. I mean, I can't describe it. It's maybe for big city folk, it wouldn't be that impressive, but for us around here, it's a neat thing, and it's free, and it's usually packed. So my strategy is the day after Christmas, when they're closed, we always go to Patty's, where we've got this whole lighted Christmas wonderland to ourselves. And so this year was no different. And we were driving. I drive down the trace from where I'm at. I actually purposely go through LBL on the trace. And we were seeing deer, and we'd seen coyotes, we'd seen fox, and an owl buzzed in front of the headlights. And again, people around here know on the nights that you start seeing a lot of stuff, wildlife, you've got a good chance of seeing everything that's rumored to be in LBL on those nights. And man, we were almost out. We were to the canal, and there's a bridge. and I looked down right at the guardrail, and it was, I don't know, Martin thinks it might have been a Dogman. It was definitely a wolf. And I went back and again shot a video and got measurements of this thing about how wide it was, but it was laying by the guardrail, between the road and the guardrail. And there's a big drop off right on the other side. And this thing, it crouched as it was standing up, if that makes sense. Its back was coming up. It had yellow eyes. This thing looked at me, Jeremiah. I can close my, I don't have to close my eyes. I can see it right now, and it creeped me out because it's like, if you've seen American Werewolf in London, when that werewolf is back in the alley and first comes out of the dark, that's what I saw. And it raised up, and I'm saying to my wife at the time, I said, "Good Lord, did you see the size of that coyote?" She said, "Where?" And I said, "It's right there." And I let off, I didn't put my foot on the brake. I let off the accelerator. She looked right at me. "Don't you stop. You do not get." Because she had heard a lot of these stories of the Dogman actually chasing cars and doing stuff like that. So I went back. She was even nervous. We went back probably 2 months later. We were through there. And I just on a whim, I always keep it's my day pack. People call it a bug out bag, but you could live out of the bag. So if we're going on a trip somewhere, I make sure it's in whatever vehicle I'm in. And I keep a tape measure now that I'm a Bigfoot guy. I keep a tape measure in there. So I just stopped, and she said, "What are you doing?" And I looked at my daughter. I said, "Here, come here, hold the camera. We're going to film something." And Kara, asked my wife, she was really nervous at us being there in the broad daylight and noon. And what's weird about that is my cousin had come through in October and just asked me if I'd ever seen a wolf there, because he thought he saw what was a large coyote walking along the trace when he was coming through. And then in March, I was fishing, and I've got a nice boat, but a lot of times, well, in the spring, I'll walk the bank and just get a hike in, and I'll walk the bank fishing, just kind of see where the fish are going to be coming up and what part of the cove they're going to use and what structure and logs and things. And then I'll hike back through the woods to wherever my car's parked. I came around the corner, and there was a boat there, and I've never run into anybody doing the same thing I'm doing where I'm doing it. And I had surprised these people in the boat. They were bass fishing, but we got to talking, and the first thing the guy asked me, he said, "Have you ever seen a wolf?" I said, "Well, yes, sir, I have." And I told him the story. They were coming in that morning, and he said, up on the power lines going into a place called Fenton Access, he said, "I saw the biggest, blackest wolf I have seen in years." And the guy went on to share that he had been stationed, I think both of them had been stationed in Alaska with the Army. And we're both very familiar with wolves compared to coyotes. So yeah, you hear in this Dogman stuff, you hear the different categories, and if it's actually looks like a wolf but it can stand up, or is it a man? And again, I'm not knowledgeable in that, and I'm honestly not trying to be knowledgeable in that, but I did see any coyotes or foxes or wildlife I've ever seen when a car was coming by, they didn't actively engage the driver and adopt a stance like they were fixing to pounce a 6,000-pound vehicle going 30, 40 miles an hour.
Why do you think there's so much weird stuff concentrated in this one area?
Well, I think it goes back. I've got a history minor. I've got a business degree, but I taught history in school. I'm fascinated with that. It's rumored my great-grandfather's mom was a full-blooded Cherokee. Her name was Sula. I've never seen pictures or anything of her, but she had a weird name. And so I've always felt connected to that part. This area was a hunting ground. It was never really occupied. The Shawnee and the Cherokee, and I think maybe some of the groups coming up from the south, all kind of claimed this area. And so there's always been that legend of the medicine man that, for whatever reason, became a skinwalker or what. I don't know if he was cursed or what happened. I'm not an expert in it, but when you move down here, you hear about that. The people were relocated twice in the building of the dams, and a lot of that doesn't always get out. The construction of Kentucky Dam was started as part of the New Deal coming out of the Great Depression when they formed the TVA. Now, I don't think it was really finished until the 40s, and JFK turned that place into a recreational area in the 60s, and some of the holdouts weren't finally kicked out until the 60s and 70s. But this goes as far back. The first wave of people were moved actually twice. They were moved from the Tennessee riverbed up into LBL. They were promised that the cemeteries would be moved. That's why there's so many cemeteries, that a lot of them have been relocated, but there is no confirmation if the bodies were actually moved with the headstones. There are still headstones in the lake. When you study the haunted world and the spiritual realm, most big cemeteries where people are buried, but they had no connection there. They didn't live in the area. That their farm, there's not on their. They didn't die there. I don't know that I believe in a lot of hauntings of newer cemeteries, but in the old situations, all that emotion, all that energy, all that life force, everything was right there in that area, and it appears to be that was an issue with the Indians or the Native Americans, with the French traders and trappers that came, with the people there getting treated wrong, and then just all the, there's good and bad people everywhere. So I'm sure in an area where there was people living for 30, 40, 50, 60 years, there was probably some bad stuff that happened. So I think all that energy is trapped there. I do believe in the power of water. Jesus says that when you ask Jesus what you should be, he talks about being like water. The small drop can crack a rock, and he'll give you living water. It's what our bodies are made out of. It's just when you look at that and understand the flowing of water around that place, there's so many springs. So, and again, this is just my opinion. I have no expertise in this, but I know if you read and study and hear about conditions which create weird supernatural things, up to including demonic evil things, we've got them all right here.
It's a fascinating discussion, and just thank you for taking some time tonight to share what you've experienced, what you are experiencing in the area, and definitely, keep us in the loop if things continue to happen on your property, or if you continue to experience things in the land between the lakes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, man. It'd be my pleasure to. I'll definitely let you know.
Are you a gentleman where if you kind of tend to stay in the shadows, or is there a way if someone has, something they want to ask you about the Land of the Lakes, is there a way people can reach out to you at all, Mike?
Okay. Well, all right. Now, so you're gonna catch me in one, even though I'm not professing to be. I don't want to be a YouTuber or a podcaster. Joe Doyle, I'm going to blame it on him if he listens to this, has just encouraged me. And in reading the comments on some of the small town monsters stuff, I did start a YouTube channel. I haven't advertised it or asked for subscribers. I'm not doing anything with it, but it's called Smith Ridge Adventures. And it's got a little symbol of some mountains, and it says Smith Ridge on it. It's in black and white. If you go on there and search Smith Ridge Adventures, you can see some of the videos and some of the stuff I made. And so basically, if somebody would comment, oh, that footprint looks fake, or that's, why is there one footprint, or something like that on this small town monster stuff, I would just reply, you can look at the whole thing. And so I do have a Gmail, it's smithridgeadventures@gmail.com associated with that. And that would be the best way. I probably need to check it. I haven't checked it in a while, but that'd be the best way to get me. I don't want to give out my work email and flood my work email with Bigfoot stuff. So.
Hey, that sounds great. And I asked that because I learned the hard way that if I don't, then people flood my email with how do I get in touch with Mike, and I don't play those games anymore. So there you go, guys.
Absolutely.
That's how you can do it. But Mike, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you tonight, and I really appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, man. Really enjoyed it.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list. If you've had any encounters in Oregon, which I'm sure there's probably a few of you out there, please feel free to reach out immediately. You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.
Her and I can get on here and we can tell our stories. Maybe there's somebody else out there listening that's too afraid to tell their story. Maybe this will give them the courage to come out and not feel so bad about it. Who cares what anybody thinks? I know what I saw. I know what's out there. That's all I care about.
Let people know. Please let them know. If you ever see one of these things, you need to tell. Because if you don't, then shame on you. You know? Shame on you.